My name is Stanislaw Robert Liberta with AV Ultra, and in this lesson, we're going to be talking about simple screen replacements using masks in Apple Motion. In our first example with using masks, we took a look at what masks are, how they work, and we built this title. In our next lesson, we're going to be talking about sky replacements, and then we're going to move on to rotoscopes. So let's come back to this lesson and talk about what exactly is happening in this example. As you can see, we have this laptop and we're going to be replacing the image. One thing I want you to be aware of is this is a locked off shot. This is going to be fundamentally different than if we were tracking and replacing a screen that may be moving from a camera. As an example, if you have a camera that's moving, you're going to need to be able to track this information to get it to line up properly. We're going to be covering this in our 4-point tracker lesson, so stay tuned for that or jump ahead to that lesson. Let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. What I've done is I've opened up 18 to a end, and in here we have our original footage, we have a mask, and then we have our replacement footage. I've opened up my 18 to a start, and here we can see we have a laptop, and what we want to do is replace this quickly and easily. We have a couple different ways we can do that. The first way I'm going to show you is using masks. So I'm going to come to my screen replace footage that is in my screen to replace group. What I'm going to do is just go to my masks, my Bezier mask, and I'm going to zoom in really tight here. Make a point. I'm holding onto the space bar, make another point, come down to the bottom of my screen, make a third point, make a fourth point, and then close that mask. What we have now is just the isolated screen. And behind that, you can see I have my replace screen. We're going to turn that off for right now. And let's come back to our mask, open up our inspector, invert that mask. So what we have now is a big old hole in our screen. So if I turn that replace screen back on, there it is. It may be replaced, but it's not lined up correctly. If I turn off my screen to replace, you can see what's happening is it's really just cut this out, but it's not using this full image at all. Turn my screen to replace back on and go to my replaced screen. And what we want to do is we want to move this to fit it into these points. The easiest way to do that is coming down to our selection tools and go to Distort. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have this group selected, and I'm going to drag these points right to our mask position. And I'm going to zoom that in really nice and close because I want to make sure that this is fairly close to where that mask begins and ends. So I'm going to get in really nice and tight. Just going to go to my transform and deselect everything. And now if I play this back, that's starting to look pretty good. In this particular scene, I have a very shallow depth of field. And what that's doing is that's making this very, very crisp because it's not affected by the camera's depth of field. So this may be in focus, but this should be starting to go out of focus. And if I zoom in really close, check out what's happening here. There's a lot of grain and noise that's happening that isn't present in our replacement. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with this just to sell it a little bit more. In our replacement screen, I'm going to go to my libraries and I'm going to go to my filters. And the first thing we're going to do is add a bit of a gradient blur. And I'm going to place this gradient blur on a replacement screen. And right away, we have some controls of what exactly it's doing. So I'm going to take this point and we're going to pull that in focus. And we're going to move that slightly out of focus. The next thing I'm going to do is adjust this a little bit. We're going to turn up that blur a little bit more. I'm going to drag that pretty far out to here. Turn that on and off, and I might dial that back just a little bit. The next thing I want to do is I want to add some grain to this so it matches the rest of my scene. So if I go to my library, we can come down to our search bar and I'm going to type in noise. So I'm going to add this noise to our replacement screen. Right away, it's far too much, and I'm going to turn that down quite a bit. And we're going to make it monochrome. I'm going to turn down a bit of this mix and turn this up a little. And really what I'm looking to do is just take a little bit of this onto here. Turning down this mix softens it just a little bit. And we're going to take this add noise and make sure it's below our gradient. And again, I'm just kind of using this to rough up our image just a little bit. Turn that down again to about, let's say 12, and a grain of about 0.1. The last thing I'm noticing is that the rest of my scene is just a little bit darker than this screen. Sure, this screen is a light source and it's going to be pretty bright, but if I turn this off, you're going to notice that that screen is fairly dark. That's a little bit more natural than this replacement screen. I'm going to come to my brightness and place a brightness effect on there. And what we're going to do is just turn this down a bit. Again, before, here's our screen. And now after. It's a little bit more realistic, and there's a lot more we can do with this. The beauty of working with something like this is I can take this replacement screen and come down to the media, go to our image, and just turn it into a drop zone. And now what this does is anything that I throw into this is going to have the same brightness, gradient, blur, add noise automatically, and it's going to be scaled down to fit proportionately in our screen. So let's go ahead and do that. I have my AV Ultra B I'm placing in there, and I'm going to just turn that off. We'll go to our bottom drop zone, and under this source media, we're going to change this from the AV Ultra Transimage A to B, and automatically it's already replaced. So that's a way that we can use a mask to cut out our screen so we can replace images in there. Instead of using a mask, what we can do is just corner pin our replacement screen in place. We can just delete that really quick. And under our replaced screen, if you go into our properties, you can see what we did in our 4-corner pin is we already placed our 4 corners where they're going to exist. So if I drag this above my other group, that should work the same exact way. So why exactly would we want to use mask as opposed to this corner pin? It really depends on what your output is going to be. There's lots of times where we may not exactly know what is going to go into this. So by having a mask and being able to set these drop zones, we can export this to any other different program and someone can still work with that cutout piece of footage. As an example, if we have this mask and I turn this off and I turn on my transparency, I can export this and this will now be transparent. Whereas if I just had this corner pinned to the top, I can't export that same exact way. So that's 2 different ways that we could replace a screen in a locked off shot. In our next lesson, we're going to be taking a look at sky replacements and using a complex mask to cut out and replace the sky. Again, my name is Stanislaw Robert Liberta with AV Ultra. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.